Hello, 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 everybody. Okay, Crystal Griffith here with your daily dose of emotions, wisdom, and your body. So today we are delving deep into one that we all seem to have a little bit of when somebody calls us out on something. So don't forget, I am not a doctor. I don't play one on TV or any social media platform. I am here just to educate, encourage, and edify. So our word of the day is defensiveness. Have you ever felt like somebody was being critical of something that you've done or said? That could be defensiveness. I feel like that's one of those redneck jokes. Who's that guy? Defensiveness. Let's talk about it. It's intended or appropriate for defending. It's a protective mechanism, but it also is excessive sensitivity to criticism. Getting called out on the spot is not always a pleasant thing, is it? We're constantly protecting ourselves from that criticism. We don't want to expose our shortcomings, right? We see those things as real or even perceived threats to our ego. Might be a pride issue there. We are prepared to withstand or counterattack. I would also like to add that there's also an expectation when we are defensive that there's going to be an attack. So we're always looking for somebody else's words or actions to be an attack on us, which totally relates to our word tomorrow night, which is invalidation. We'll come back to that in a minute, but also it relates to unworthiness, really feeling like we're not worthy enough to make our own stand and to hear what somebody has to say and then go, so what do I need to do about that? Let me think about that. Let's take that to the Lord and see what he says. So can it be positive or negative? Well, defensiveness is a reaction itself. It's an emotional reaction. Assertive is more the opposite. And so in assertiveness, you're bringing up something first, right? You're heading the problem off at the pass. So defensiveness and assertiveness can both be positive or negative. For example, if you're assertive and you're mean about it, you're actually on the defensive already, and that's a negative. So where is this really affecting our body? Defensiveness counters or denies criticism in areas we feel sensitive or triggered or unworthy or inadequate. Take your pick. For many, this is a way we can emotionally protect ourselves. So our brain is going to instinctively, I can talk tonight, instinctively kick in with fight, flight, freeze, or faint, our 4 Fs that we've been talking about. And when it thinks that we're in trouble, which now we feel like we're being attacked, so clicks in, right? It can lead to an overwhelming emotion like anger, which is typically what happens. You start getting called out on the carpet, and that's not to say whether they're doing it in a nice way or not, but you feel that perceived threat of, am I going to lose my job? Is this bad in a relationship? Am I not being a good parent? Right? We go through all these different ideas in our head, and that anxiety begins to rise, and then we become overwhelmed. And before we know it, we want to take a stand against whatever we're being told. And by George, that's not the case, right? So even if we aren't in bodily danger, we can feel under attack when it feels like someone is threatening our sense of identity, our key values, our worth. And I just want to remind you of something. Your worth is not dependent on anyone or anything on this planet. Your worth is because you exist. You are worthy. You are priceless. You are a masterpiece because you live and breathe on this earth. So I just want to remind you of that. So let's talk a little bit differently about defensiveness. And this one's super important for our special needs families. Tactile defensiveness is more sensitive to touch compared to others. So if you're feeling that tag in the shirt, if you feel like this is like a velour kind of velvet kind of thing, and so it's super smooth, right? My daughter keeps coming up and rubbing on my shoulder today. Or you could have something that's a little itchy as a sweater or a shirt. And so those particular tactile feeling pieces cause your body to become defensive, actually. So often people who have tactile defensiveness, their skin is super sensitive to everyday things like clothes or hair brushing. Boy, I wish I'd had this information when my kiddo was 2 or 3, when we were going through World War III, just trying to brush her hair because it was so thick. And that's why we had to keep it short for a long time, because I learned very quickly this was not a good plan. We didn't know back then what we know now. These kind of situations and the people who are in them, they can report that certain touch is actually painful for them. I had no idea a blow dryer was so incredibly painful as a touch. And it wasn't because it was hot. It was even on cool, but it was just that feeling of it against her skin would drive her nuts. So children and adults with autism frequently report tactile defensiveness. And you may have also heard it called sensory processing issues. So they're not being defensive on purpose. They literally cannot handle the feel of what is on their skin at the moment, and they don't know how else to handle it. So enter TBRI, which is an amazing intervention by Karen Purvis. And we can talk about that another time if you want more details. But man, that can solve a world of situations for us if you learn some of those tools. So how much is too much emotion here? We're talking about defensiveness. What happens? What does that look like if you have too much defensiveness? Well, you can be in denial. You can just flat refuse to see all your responsibility and that a problem exists at all. And you can begin to project and blame somebody else. Well, if so-and-so hadn't done so-and-so, I wouldn't be where I am today. Or if that hadn't happened in my childhood, I wouldn't have the crappy life that I have today. So oftentimes we're very quick to project our blame to someone else or something else as part of our defensive mechanism. So we tend to attribute our own thoughts or feelings to another person. Like, I'm not angry, you're angry. Boy, that's a good one for an argument, right? Because that solves everything. How about acting out? You're having an overblown response, like something broke and now it's the end of the world. Like that little molehill became this huge mountain. And for that tactile defensive group, boy, that's a big issue because that will blow up super fast and faster than anything you've seen from that molehill to a mountain. So they can't always express their problems or what the problem actually is. And again, that's where that trust-based relational intervention, TBRI, by Dr. Karen Purvis is so helpful because you can begin to ask certain questions to see if we can get to the bottom of the problem. The key with defensiveness is if you're not the one being defensive, you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's somebody that works for you, maybe it's your child, maybe it's your spouse, and you're having a really serious conversation about really a triggering topic or a sensitive topic. It's super important that you stay regulated, that you stay in upstairs brain. Remember, upstairs brain is your executive processing right here. That's your judgment, your rationalization, and really your opportunity to make good executive decisions. And so when we go to downstairs brain, we're not making all those good positive decisions. We are blowing up, we're in denial, we're acting out, we're in projection, we're dysregulated. So if you can see that they're beginning to be dysregulated and maybe the pupils of the eyes have changed, maybe they're clenching their fists, maybe they're going a little flushed. You know, here's the thing. In that moment, is it more important to connect with that person or is it more important to get your point across? I'm going to say that one more time. In those moments where you know now that person is triggered by what the conversation is, even if you're trying to do it in the best way possible, is it more important to connect with that person or is it more important to get your point across? Because I'm going to tell you 10 out of 10, it is more important to connect with that person. Because then they're going to be willing to come back to you and say, hey, I had some time to think about it. I'd really like to kind of finish that conversation. And I'm a lot calmer now. And so having that opportunity to connect is going to lead you to a better outcome in the end. So another way that we see too much defensiveness is displacement. We're taking out our frustration on another problem or someone not involved. Perhaps you're just getting in a fight with your partner because of trouble at work. We do this a lot with our kids where we come in and we're super stressed about something going on with work or even with our spouse or another relationship. And we tend to just rah on the kids and they're just like, I don't know what to step, right? Now, sometimes it is the kids, sometimes it's not, but the majority of the time it's probably not. So rationalization is another one. You're bending the truth to justify your behavior. And that could look like a lot of things. And then the last one is intellectualizing. You're only focusing on the facts of the situation while you're ignoring that emotional significance. And for people with tactile defensiveness, that particular group really does tend to not sometimes see the social cues and have that emotional awareness of how their actions or their words are actually influencing or affecting somebody else. You see this all day long on one particular show that just went off the air in May of this past year, which had 4 guys who are supposed to be scientists, and one of them has autism, and he never catches the social clues ever. So like that was the very last episode. They were all shocked that he actually caught social cues and he addressed them. And they were shocked about that because he had never done that in the whole history of the show. So just food for thought there. So how do we help ourselves with our defensiveness? How do we walk into better coping strategies and really self-compassion, where we can identify that it's not necessarily an attack on ourselves, our values, our worth, but it's actually giving us food for thought of how to make some changes in our lives that could take us to a whole nother level in whatever we're doing, in relationship, in work, even in what you're trying to create. So let's talk a little bit about those. First of all, we need to practice the skills of self-compassion and problem solving. And that really lets us pause and use our instinctive reasoning. What you may be getting, to be completely honest, could be that person having a fight with their spouse from home and they're just taking it out on you. Absolutely could happen that way. Just like we just talked about that we might do it to our kids. And so in that moment, when you're hearing something coming at you like that, to take the breaths, and we're going to talk about 3 different types of breaths in just a second. And when you take those breaths, you can really ask the question, is this really about me? Or is this about something else? And be honest, because it could be about you. It could be about your work. But in that moment, you're taking a breath, you're listening, you're actively listening. So that pause gives us space to hear and to understand what's coming at us, even if it makes us uncomfortable in that moment, because golly, I mean, it's coming at me, right? Even though I'm having to receive this and I can't get out of it for some reason. But then we can put our best foot forward on working on a solution that everybody can agree with and work forward from. And so if we just come across in anger, we get in that defensive mode, our coping strategies are out the window and we're just angry. And that's going to come across as such. And to be honest, you could get fired. You could, what's the word I'm trying to, here's the TBI kind of situation with the brain here. It's the word where you can damage your relationship in such a way that you can't get it back. I can't think of the word today. All right. So we want to think through whatever you're going to say in that situation could really cause some long-term damage. So we definitely want to take that pause. Coping strategies are also ways we can purposely choose how to really handle difficult emotions that are rising up within, might be in the situation. And it's a stressful situation overall when you get called out, if it's a critique or not. So instead of defensiveness, move into self-compassion. So Dr. Kristin Neff indicates that self-compassion has 3 parts to it. The first part is kindness. And so being understanding towards yourself when you experience these negative feelings that are coming up and not ignoring them. Remember, feelings buried alive never die. So we don't want to bury them. We want to handle them. We need to not ignore them, but we also don't want to punish ourselves in the process of this. So we really want to treat ourselves as you would a friend who needs help. You know, what do you need? If you get out of a bad situation, they've called you out on some work, or your spouse has had a hard conversation with you, or even a family member or a friend. And so what do you need in that moment to just bring yourself back to upstairs brain and to regulate? Because that is step 1. You've got to get back into upstairs brain before you can do anything else. And then part 2 is a connectedness. You have to recognize that you're not alone with this problem. Everybody in the world struggles with difficult emotions. Nobody likes getting called out. They don't. And at some point in their lives, they have made mistakes that they have to deal with. So the biggest part about kingdom in what I am sharing with you with the verses and what we talk about with emotions is that G word called grace. And oftentimes we can offer grace to other people, but we can't offer it for ourselves. And so I really do want to encourage you to begin to offer yourself some grace. That does not excuse bad behavior, and it does not mean you don't get to take accountability for whatever has gotten messed up. You still need to do that. But grace is something that allows you to say, hey, I made a mistake. I'm not perfect, but what can I do to solve this problem? 1, so it doesn't happen again, and 2, to correct it. And that could be public apologies. That could be private apologies. That could be you taking coverage if you have a business and you made a mistake, say on a sign, and you have to reprint it. That's on you, not them. And so you want to do your best to make it right with them. If that's with your spouse, asking them, you know what? I really screwed this one up. What can we do to move forward here so you feel like we are at, back to ground zero, and you know that I'm here to support us, I'm here to support you. What can I do to make that happen? Having those conversations allows the other person to also hear that you're taking accountability for the situation, you're not dismissing it, and they're more likely to offer you some grace as well. So mindfulness is part 3 to this. So we have kindness, connectedness, and mindfulness. So being open to difficult emotions that you're experiencing in the moment without making them feel like the mountain out of the molehill. Super important. Acknowledge you're in distress without being swept away, without being overwhelmed. Remember, you got the Prince of Peace in you. So that Prince of Peace, even in this chaos, needs to overwhelm the chaos. So the last part were those 3 breaths that I mentioned earlier. And this comes out of a Harvard Business Review because they suggest taking 3 breaths before you even respond in the situation that's put you on edge. So breath 1, and these are not shallow, fast breaths, they're deep breaths. There's nothing in that situation that says you got to answer them right then. Take the breaths, okay? Breath 1. Acknowledge your first reaction, but don't do it. That's when you go, ooh, I would really like to deck you right now. Don't do that. That's not going to be a good plan. All right, so taking a deep breath, that's going to be really helpful for you in that moment. Breath 2, acknowledge your second reaction and don't do it. So the first one was, I really want to deck you right now. The second one might be, I'm really pissed off with you and I want to say things that I probably shouldn't say, right? Don't do those either, because that kind of falls into retaliation. And now you're actually blaming the person in front of you for whatever's going on. It may or may not be part of the situation. So just take a step back, take those 2 deep breaths. Breath 3. Now that you've given yourself a moment to get past defending yourself and retaliating, try to find a solution. And in offering those solutions, be that solution seeker. They've brought you a problem, basically. They have said, and they probably have done it wrong. They've probably said, you, right? And so that's why we're on the defensive. But if you can hear what they're bringing to you and turn it around and say, okay, so I hear you saying this is the problem. Maybe you hit a wrong number. Maybe you didn't have good customer care, whatever that is, whatever that problem is, even your kid bringing you this. So I'm hearing you really say that you haven't had enough time this week with your friends. You're listening for the problem. That removes you out of it and the defensiveness. And now you get to be a solution seeker and find how to solve the problem. And when you solve the problem, you're everybody's hero. So what are your 3 wisdom verses? Philippians 4:8, you probably know this one very well. Finally, brethren, whatever may be true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are true, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Another way to say that is speak those things, right? 2 Timothy 3:16. All scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof. That's what we're talking about here. Maybe you're getting a reproof. For correction. Maybe you're getting a correction, a redirection. And for training in righteousness. And the last one is Proverbs 12:15. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. Can't beat that. Listen. Find the solution to the problem, and you become the wise man. So, how are you going to use this new information on defensiveness? Remember, wisdom is not just in the hearing, but the understanding and application. So, your 3 questions. How has defensiveness been showing up in your life? Has it been negative or has it been positive? What's been your usual response? What have you heard today that you could change that a little bit? You could be the solution seeker. And how could you transform defensiveness? By wisdom, understanding, and knowledge as you move forward. And don't forget, put your name in the scriptures. So the way of a fool is right in their own eyes, but a wise woman named Crystal listens to advice. I am going to be the solution seeker, right? How about you? Go live, share with us the most unexpected thing you learned tonight about defensiveness. Tomorrow's word I already mentioned to you is invalidated, because we typically feel pretty invalidated when we are on the defense. Join us again tomorrow for Emotions, Wisdom in Your Body. Register at kcrystalgriffith.com for more insights and your feelings wheel. Can't wait to be with you guys tomorrow. Have a blessed day.